we all need to work together towards a common goal. It's I don't know how you say that in a way that's not idealistic, because realistically, I think it's more clear than ever how diverse the way people think can be, and that they're all in some capacity, at least a little bit right. And they're definitely right to have their own convictions, that's for sure. So how do we find common ground and move forward? And I do firmly believe that all the technology changes that are occurring here plays heavily into this too, of how much disparity there can be. And I'll avoid all the obvious topics of social media and such playing into these things, but it's a factor. So I don't know where the guardrails kind of come back on to say there's more positive than negative for all these changes, and now society is benefiting as a whole. It's happening in pockets, and in other places it's quite the opposite. And there has to be some inflection point there where really one way or the other something wins, whether it's good or bad. And so I would truly hope that there's something there, that there's a consistent drive among people to want it to be generally positive.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Leaders in Tech, where we're interviewing people that are obviously leaders in technology, but really with a life purpose and changing their organizations for better. Today we have with us Jeff dePascale. I don't know if I said your last name wrong. I'm sorry about that, Jeff. Welcome to the show.
Very frequently mispronounced, and you were very, very close to exactly right. So thank you. It's dePascale.
dePascale.
Yes.
Awesome. And I should know better, because the first programming language I learned was Pascal. I don't know if people remember that, but yeah.
Oh, I remember it. Oh, yes.
There used to be a language called Pascal.
Yes.
This podcast is brought to you by ISU Corp. Are you having trouble with your software projects? Is there a project that's taking too long, or a technology you can't handle? We can help. We are ISU Corp, experts in custom software since 2005. With almost 20 years of experience, we can solve any technical problem, from new businesses to satellite software. We've done it all. Let us turn your ideas into reality. Learn more about how we can help by visiting us at www.isucorp.ca. Your solution starts here.
Jeff, for the audience, can you give me your full name again? Where do you live and what do you do for a living?
Sure. So my name is Jeff dePascale. I am the CTO for CallRevu. I'm located south of Philadelphia, and I'm the head of technology and product. In a short version of what we do, basically, we work with automotive dealerships and do analysis of phone calls that come in and out of the dealership to identify areas for improvement, potential risk, etc.
With phone calls, you said, right?
Yes.
Okay. Can you get me through the process? So that is the main objective of the company, right? Take me the process. I don't understand.
Yeah. So basically, the business problem that we're working to resolve is where do I have gaps in customer experience or potential risk that I need to be aware of, as a GM, for example, that I don't have visibility to, that the data is there. It's occurring in your interactions, it's in your phone calls. And if you're not doing something to mine that and, effectively elevate the needles out of the haystack for the thousands of phone calls that occur there for people that are buying a car or trying to get their car serviced, et cetera, if I don't know that if people are having trouble getting their car in because there's no bays, for example, or, that somebody's looking for a particular model and there was an opportunity to source one that was not attempted, things like that. We're there to basically do that proactive work on behalf of the dealership by looking at the phone calls and pulling that information out using AI technologies and provide back, here's the things you need to be looking at. Here's the lens you need to be looking through. And most recently for us, it's going a step further and actually then proactively working with those individual contributors as well to say, hey, here's something that could have been done better. How can we work with you to actually train you through that, also using AI as a proactive resolution to that business problem?
It's amazing how AI technology is just skyrocketing these days. It's like we hit the hockey stick in the chart.
Yeah.
I knew that AI was part of the digital revolution, and that it looks very boring at the beginning. Because when you start scaling exponentially at the beginning, you don't see it. That's why they call it the hockey stick, right? But
Right.
Tiny, 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 but all of a sudden you hit that pivotal moment where everything goes up
That inflection point. Yep.
exponentially,
Yeah.
like a rocket ship.
Yep.
I just recently learned that now we're actually implementing AI agents. Are you guys working with agents already?
We are not yet. That's something we're looking at. There's some components of things there that are kind of roadmap related for us. But the space, the background for us that I think is relevant is that this organization goes back to 2007. I've been here 4 years, and it's historically a BPO company actually, because back in until the turn of AI and especially LLMs becoming the opportunity to do things here, especially cost effectively, the only way to do it before was to use people. So you have people listening to phone calls, and so for us, the last 2 to 3 years has been really an opportunity of saying, look, we're finally at a point technologically where there are tools that can be utilized that can now address some of these things that have been gaps of how do we do this with pure technology. Now we can do it with pure technology. We can do it cost effectively, and it's scalable. And so we were actually we were the chat GPT wave that started in November, I guess about 2 years ago now. We rode that right from the get-go. And we were a very early adopter working with Azure for leveraging their implementations. So we were real early especially for our size org, I think, in actually bringing that to actual business outcomes, not just the R&D process. And the outcomes, obviously it's beneficial for the technology and the business and scalability, et cetera. But the customer outcomes were really profound too, and it exceeded what we thought might happen. And that's been a consistent thing that we've seen is, you do your analysis, you see where you're shooting for an outcome, and then pretty consistently, for the most part, it's been that the actual result that we've seen for what the customer facing component of this is exceeding what we expected to see. In particular, from a consistency perspective, because any place that you're doing, if you're working with people, you can't go to a group of people and say, forget everything that you learned before. We need you to do this now, because they'll still remember. And so that retraining process from a human perspective is a little bit fraught with who's going to pick it up, et cetera. And so you wind up with this range of accuracy that you've got a kind of a median for. And that median bar leveraging machine learning is dramatically better, because if you find something that's flawed, you can effectively erase that memory and say, let's retrain and improve. And now here's our new baseline, and we're consistently at that baseline. And that's been a big benefit. I think the consistency in particular has been one of the biggest benefits that I've seen that exceeded our initial expectations.
That's amazing. We have we're very involved with our clients with digital transformation for one of my main companies, ISU Corp. And we don't start from scratch. We created a model. About 4 years ago, we realized that I've been doing digital transformation for 20 years. So 4 years ago, we were like, we are repeating this process over and over again for our clients, right? Because they need to sustain their own intellectual property. So what we did is we said, okay, what about we have a base product that is the foundation for any company, and it put them 40% ahead of schedule, and it's going to save them about 35% of their money, their investment. So we started, it's called the core, and basically it's language agnostic, data center agnostic, platform agnostic. So it just morphs to whatever the client has.
Yeah.
And I tell you about this because we keep improving it every year. And so last year, about a year and a half ago, we started actually implementing serious AI into it.
Yeah.
And I just had a meeting. I don't get too much involved with technology anymore, which is a shame because I love it. But I just had a meeting with the lead project manager and the architects. And when they show me that what the AI agents can do, the project manager and the main business analyst, she told me, I'm afraid this thing is going to take my job away. Like, she was seriously concerned.
That's a bit of a recurring theme too. I mean, I will acknowledge that even, for our size company, it's interesting to see how quickly you can already see that, I have a son who's in college, he's 18, and he's not going the tech route. And I rode the wave, luckily, coming out of college. I'm 44 now. That it was right at that point where if you do anything in tech, you've probably got an interview. It was that time frame, and it's completely the opposite now. I question, and I've heard a lot about even just like reading Reddit and things like that, of just seeing people talking about like the job market experience. And you can definitely see already, I think, the impact on the job market, especially for no experience resources trying to get that foot in the door. I do agree that AI is the biggest risk there in that regard. At the same time, I think it's also important to acknowledge, though, that this is not the first time in history that's happened, where, you know, the skill set you needed before is suddenly outmoded, but it's always replaced with something that, you know, you're probably not being educated on, though, all right? Because it's new, it's too new. And so we're at that inflection point right now where I wouldn't be surprised if, you know, a few years from now, there's new fields that are being driven that are more about how are you utilizing this technology as opposed to directly building it being a core skill set. You know, we have a team member on staff at my company now that is our prompt engineer, basically, and his background is not actually a technologist. He actually came out of our client services division, and he called me at one point, because I always make it clear across my org that, you know, if you don't report to me, if you want to talk about something, call me. You know, that's part of the job, is being cross-functional and a steward of your own pillar, but you're a steward of the org too. And so I always say this, and I'm sure 98% of people say, whatever, he doesn't mean it. Well, this guy called me, a few people have, but this guy called me and he said, I kind of feel like I'm in the wrong role. I'm not that great at what I'm doing now, but I do this other stuff, and it's what you guys are doing. I want to talk to you about it. And it's prompt engineering. He's got this great background as a technologist, but like hobbyist. And it happens to be that his background of knowing the business so well and understanding the technology is this perfect marriage of really strong R&D capabilities that has been a real big benefit for us. And, you know, trying to find, you know, if it's hard to get a job coming out of college today as a developer, the exact opposite is true if you have anything that can say that you have any acumen for prompt engineering whatsoever. You know, if you can prove it at all, someone's going to talk to you, because there is no existing background for that, really. There's not going to be many people that say, I did it here already, I can do it again. We're still in that phase of the first wave of people that do it for a lot of companies. And it was a total win for us as an org, and for him. It's been great to see the career, you know, talk about hockey sticks. The career track opportunity for him specifically has been exciting to see, because, you know, it's what he wants to be doing. And it's totally about the timing of all of this has just landed that there's this great slot for him. That now he's building those bullets out and delivering for us of the stuff that he wants to be doing. And it's a job that didn't exist a year and a half ago at all.
And it's amazing. And you know what? I think you're right with a lot of things that you said. I got caught in that panic when the internet came about, for example, or when we got introduced to email. I am old enough to, like, I was just a university grad when email was introduced.
Yeah.
And so I started researching the history of the human advancement in technology. And if you go to the very beginning, right? When people invented agriculture, we started creating societies like cities and settlements and townships, because before we were all just moving around, because there was nothing to sustain us. We just had to hunt and gather. But after we created agriculture, we could actually study. So that was the first technology revolution in humanity. Everything was good. And you know what? That stayed there for thousands of years, until the Industrial Revolution came around, and people could actually start doing the agricultural part way more efficient and way faster with machines. And people got freaked out that they were going to lose their jobs. Which people? The people that, you know, were plowing the landfill by hand or with an ox, right?
Right.
You know, but by 1895, 95% of the U.S. jobs were in agriculture. Now it's 5%.
Yeah. Right.
But guess what? With that 5%, we produce 100 times more than we used to produce in the 1800s.
Yep.
But also look at the population growth. It's exponential too. So, and we have a problem finding people right now.
Yeah.
Right. So, what that tells you is that every revolution makes a shift, a paradigm shift in the way people create jobs. It doesn't mean that it's going to displace jobs, right?
Right. I know. I completely agree. And, you know, it's obviously important to note that, you know, the fear is valid, right? I mean, because we don't know how it's going to play out. but to your point, there's multiple points historically where you can look at exactly what you call out. And I think the most interesting thing about it though is that the rate at which that happens and that it turns over, it's shrinking every time, right? And that's in parallel to the rate of change technologically, where we're clearly in yet another hockey stick there too. Because I usually point to AI for a period of time there was like, if you don't put this in your pitch deck, nobody's going to be interested in your company. And the last thing for that was blockchain. Blockchain was one of those examples where 85% of the people who put it in their pitch deck, they were just lying. They didn't even have anything. It's like, you have to put it there. We're thinking about it. We'll come up with something, but there really weren't, like, there's applications for sure, but they're more niche, right? Where they really, really apply. AI felt like that for a while. And, especially once LLMs really hit too, it's like, oh, of course we're using that. But the reality is that the applications of it are so, there's just so many that if you do a little bit of research, you will find opportunities and be able to deliver fairly quickly. So, there's blockchain is not in this list I'm about to say, but the other things that are more relevant, I think, are, actually, there's really two that I think are the most important to call out of the past 20 years, in my opinion. One is the smartphone revolution, which I think is the easiest to see and is often talked about, that, between, just getting to those touchscreen phones with app stores, there was a period of time where everything changed rapidly. And then in the 5 years after that, it was rapid iteration, and then a little less. And now we're at a point where it's a commodity, right? It's a total commodity, which, correlates that. By the way, we're a VoIP provider. At this point, it's like, oh yeah, we offer that too. And it's valuable for our customers that they can have us be the whole communication solution. But you don't lead with the phone system because it's VoIP. Everybody knows VoIP. They're used to it now. You don't have to explain it anymore. It just is, right? So it's, that's another one that's kind of in that space. Graphics processors are another one though. And the interesting thing about that is that they're so closely coupled to AI, but it's another one where we're right in the phase right now where every major iteration is a massive leap forward versus where historically it would have been iterative. And there was a change a few years back tied to AI where that started to groundswell again. And now, everybody at NVIDIA is a billionaire as a result of it. But, those, if you really just take, smartphone revolution and now this, that time gap is not that big for some things, things that completely change the way we do business. That's that's close, right? And so, you go back and it's further and further. My father was in effectively a similar role to me in the 80s, called something completely different at the times, obviously. And we've had conversations in the past where, I've said to him historically that I've had a fear about my own career of, with a rate of change this fast, how can you really foresee your own relevance? Because I have no idea what by 2035, what my teams in theory would be delivering on for tools and capabilities that just don't exist today. I briefly worked in the VR and AR space, which I firmly believe AR is going to be the next major wave driven by AI, pushing it back to the forefront, I think. And, the applications of that have completely changed in the way that you engage with a system, for a business perspective. There's a lot that's going to change there too. And I have no idea what will be expected of me as a business leader in terms of what you deliver out. But what is consistent all the way back through the 80s when my father was doing this is that at the end of the day, you're still building products and delivering for solving business problems or end user consumer problems and delivering a product that's a result for that. And so, through that lens, I can see how I can probably stumble through it. But at the same time, it's probably, I personally am glad that I took the route of being a business leader and not hands-on tech, because I am certain that between AI and the generations coming after me, that being a hands-on developer, there's no way I could have kept up. It's so fast. I have people on my team that have managed to do it, and I really applaud them for doing it. It's amazing to me because I know I couldn't have.
But at the same time, Jeff, I mean, I had a developer background. I fell in love with programming, and the last time I did it was in 2011 when I really had to become a serious business leader.
Yeah.
And I see the kids, I see the kids in my company, and the tools that they have to produce the outcomes they need to produce is exponentially better than you and I had.
Yes.
Like I remember when the internet revolution came and you had to learn HTML and you had to produce a website.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, even you were using JavaScript or whatever dynamic trying to do it, just you have to code everything by hand and re-render it in the browser, and like every pixel had to be managed.
And
That's how
just for the 5 different variant platforms that support it, because
exactly.
none of them are the same. Oh, very
And
vividly.
forget
Yeah.
the intuitiveness, right? Like
Yeah.
trying to make it work on screens, it was a pain.
Yeah.
Now I see these kids and they are using AI to produce their code, asking AI how to solve this problem in Python. Like one of my friends made a ping pong game in Python by asking ChatGPT how to do it
Yeah. Yeah. Yep.
from scratch. And
Yeah.
he had to change 2 bugs, but he didn't change them. He told AI, "You have a bug here." The AI apologized and fixed the error.
Yeah. Yeah. And knowing how all that stuff works, it really comes down to that training data. And that goes to show how many people have historically built applications just like that it could generate code with that many samples that generally works. Right. And so, for us, I've been saying for a while at the leadership level, people say, are you using AI to generate code? And the answer until recently has been, well, yes, for machine learning development and for front end work, because there's a lot of consistency with the way that you do those things. A carousel image viewer is a carousel image viewer, as it just use a very basic example. So sure, that'll probably work 95% right. But your proprietary code, no, because it doesn't know your business and what you do because your code's not in there. So the most recent thing that's now starting to change there, which, at the time a year ago, my answer was no, we're not. But I guarantee you 6 months to a year from now, my answer is going to be different, right? That's the important thing to maintain awareness of right now is what you know today is accurate today in theory, but you should recognize that it's changing so fast that you should be open to that. Your 1 year roadmap could be impacted by something you don't know about yet. That is a very unique business position that I have not seen before. And so, now we're in a position where you can take your proprietary code and provide access to that through GitHub and the other tools that are out there. And it's now informed in the prompt that it can use your own code and provide code back that in theory will work. And we're looking at leveraging that right now.
Yeah, it's amazing because that's where the exponential part comes that nobody can really predict because I told you the hockey stick chart at the beginning, but
Yeah.
like we don't get it. We don't
Yeah.
get how fast it grows once it becomes exponential.
You can only see it in hindsight. Yeah.
I wrote a book 2 years ago. It's
Mhm.
called AI or Die.
Mhm.
And this book was specifically for my clients and for my prospects. Basically, it's a business book written by a business guy that knows a little bit of technology.
Mhm.
And I thought in the book, my proposition was if you don't start implementing AI right now, in a couple of years, you're going to be bankrupt because your
Yeah.
competition is doing it already.
Yep.
And my book is obsolete now.
Yeah.
I won't have anybody to listen to the book because I show tools and how to implement some of the things. I go into some more mathematical things. It's obsolete now.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, I believe it. That's just the state of affairs. I agree. Yeah.
And another thing that is amazing to me is that when I was growing up as a technologist, I remember that I had the advantage in every job that I had because I loved change. And that's why I went to computer science because I love the fast pace of change.
Yeah.
And I became a good business leader because I knew that normal business people hated change. So
Yeah.
I was smart enough to implement change without being too aggressive. So I
Yeah.
could get the buy-in from the consumer, from our users.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
If you don't like change in 2025, you are going to be obsolete very fast
Yeah, it's true.
because there is no time. Like every day,
You'll be outvoted. Yeah.
It's incredible, right?
Yep. Yeah. Absolutely. Completely agree. Yeah. From a leadership perspective, that made a couple things pop into my head too. Like I do. So my team structured. I have department leads, and then below that I've got director levels, individual contributors, and I have a series of skip level meetings scheduled with some of those indirect reports, and I love those conversations and meetings. And a good chunk of it is because on the one hand, it's great visibility into what's your division actually running like, and what's your company, where are the pain points, et cetera, that you don't have visibility to, things like that. But at the same time, it's much more like there are no tactical discussions there because they have a manager for that. Those are the conversations where I want to hear, like, what do you want to know about? What do you want to understand? Or what can we just talk about? And for me, it's very beneficial for me, both as a leader in the org and individually, because I think it's really like, I'm a firm believer that if you think you're a good manager, you're not. you can never think you're good at managing people, because every person you're going to manage is going to be different. So if you ever tell me you're a good manager, I already have a gut reaction that you're probably not good at managing people. My feeling is that I don't think you can ever truly be good at something that is about interacting with people. You can only seek to improve and learn the next person you speak to, how to engage with them. And so those are a great opportunity, especially in technology and product. There is so much variance in the way that people think. And, part of the job of this role is just being the person that can speak both sides of it, really. And that means both explaining, obviously the obvious one people always talk about is I'm the person who can talk tech to the org, but the reverse is just as important. It's, can you help your team understand the business need and the goals? And I can't tell you how many conversations I've had in those skip level meetings where, someone will join the phone call and be a little bit annoyed, or maybe even a little bit mad and trying not to show it, of why are we doing this? I don't understand. Or you partnered for something, we could have built that, or whatever. And it's really, it's as fast as things are changing, to your point of, every, the technology is changing every year or so at this point. Those things don't change. Those things are still all the same of, well, how would you approach solving this problem? Not just from a technology perspective, but in the context of the business goal. And they're great conversations, both for, providing that insight that I think a lot of people don't see at the individual contributor level, and providing them that ability to, question it and understand it. And that's growth. It's just career opportunity growth there, which I love. But it's valuable for me too, because I really think it's very easy. Once you're beyond like the CTO that manages directly like 10 people and you're kind of hands-on, and you've got that multiple levels of leadership, I'm so far from the code at this point, both in time, 10 years later, and in actual practice, like 3 levels down, 2 to 3 levels down too, that it's very easy to accidentally make the wrong informed decision. You think you're right because you just don't know. And on top of that, some of the best ideas come from those conversations too, of, just marrying together like that idea that you don't even have an idea of how to apply to the business, and this problem we haven't solved. And it's all of a sudden like, oh, this is an opportunity, so those conversations are very exciting to me for that reason. It's honestly part of my favorite part of the job. At the point where my job these days is I'm on phone calls, I do PowerPoint slides, and I'm the person who gets yelled at if something goes wrong by a customer or internally. That's the bulk of the job.
And 3 months from now, you're going to be talking to your AI agent and you're just going to be telling it, read your voice, please make a PowerPoint that presents this research that you made for me last week.
The Microsoft Copilot, we're using it already, and some of that's already proven to be valuable. We're at a point with our company where we just hit the inflection point where we're releasing a product capability that functionally you're providing information to prompt an AI model that will then provide an output that goes into a prompt for an AI model that's then used in practice. And the round trip of that there is that a business user can say, I'm trying to accomplish this. You've got middleware AI that says, okay, here's how we can make that work to be functional. And then that plugs into a production capability as a functional output. And it just kind of happens. Like, we didn't intend to say, we're going to build something like this. It was, this is the most logical way to solve this problem. And it works exceptionally well, consistently well.
Amazing.
It is. Yeah.
For us, it's just revolution the way we do business, and it's applied everywhere. I have the blessing that because of my nature, the nature of my business, we have to be 2 years ahead of all our clients. Yeah. So our R&D is the most important thing in our business, because it's not only, I want to use AI because it's cool. No. How much money are we going to save? How much time are we going to save? How much value am I going to add to my potential clients and my existing clients?
Yeah. Yep.
Right now, we created a model. We have one of our largest clients. It's a huge laboratory, multinational laboratory. And they have very large data sets with a lot of information that comes back from the 80s.
Wow.
Across multiple data centers. So some of the reporting is horrible. We just came up with an AI model that would actually reduce 10 times the processing time for those reports.
Wow. Yeah.
We're about to show them, and they're going to get blown away.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I completely believe it too. It makes a ton of sense.
Yeah. They show me I couldn't believe it, because I was the one that got that client 10 years ago,
Yeah, it blows your mind when you see it in practice, but at the same time, it's almost an expected outcome at this time. Of course, it's going to be good.
Another thing that's blowing my mind, I'm a man of faith. I'm a born again Christian, and I was called to do a Christian channel on YouTube, 2023 in September. I'm a business owner that this is what I like doing, talking to you about technology and how to apply it to business. That's how my expertise is. Me talking about Jesus Christ on the Bible in front of a camera, it's like it was foreign to me. But the channel, the Lord started increasing the channel in an exponential way. And now, like up to last month, we got to the point where I started getting comments and messages and people asking for prayer in Egyptian Arabic, in all these kind of Hindu language, like all these kind of languages.
Yeah.
Because the videos are flying all over the world. And I'm like, when I saw that, like, I'm gonna need to hire people to translate this thing. Then ping, AI came to my head.
Yep.
And it's like, what if I actually use an AI model for this? So to make the long story short, my team, we are a team of 5 people for that whole ministry. We didn't have to hire one single person.
Yeah.
Now everybody's using AI to reply in AI in a proper way in their own language.
Yeah.
And now we're about to go to one step further. We found an AI system where when I actually record this conversation, for example, you and I can process through this model. It will actually pick my voice pitch and your voice pitch, change the video so that my mouth matches the language and create the language that we want.
Yep. Yeah, I know. And that plays into the opposite side of all of this is the nefarious opportunities tied to all of these advancements, just as big of a topic. I mean, we do training for compliance purposes to make sure people are aware of what to watch for and avoid for, et cetera. And they change constantly. The things, the platform that we use, like the topics are, every quarter that you do one, they're timely and they're relevant. I've had more than one employee say, like, I'm surprised how valuable these are. And they really are. But, is it the current state of affairs is, I usually advise if you're, if it decide what your minimum threshold for dollars risk is, that you should always take the extra step to be sure. And if you're dealing with money, always make sure that you do a video call, have everybody join and speak. Ideally, use a passphrase that is something that's pre-shared, that's known, especially internally, ideally verbally only, and then make sure everyone goes like this and turns side to side with their head, because currently today, you can definitely deep fake a video and a voice very effectively. But if you make them turn their head, technology is not quite there yet to be able to resolve that issue. And I say, every time I say it, I guarantee you 3 to 6 months from now, that will not be a valid answer anymore. And I don't know what I would say next beyond that to say you should have people do it just a standard practice. I don't know yet, but it's the risk is very, very real.
It's horrible. It's horrible actually, because these bad guys are using AI to do hacking, to put in malware everywhere.
It's too easy. It's just as easy as to develop a good product. It is to develop.
If you don't have at least two-factor authentication, you're insane. At least you need to have two-factor authentication.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's a bare minimum at this point at best. And it's even with that, you can get around that stuff these days, and AI is just making all of it easier. So,
Mark Zuckerberg was in an interview with Joe Rogan. I watched parts of it, right? Somebody came and said, this is what AI can do. So what these guys did is they grab a portion of the show, and with AI, they make Mark Zuckerberg stand up and lick Joe Rogan's head and go back in, and it looks exactly like part of the interview.
Yeah.
So scary.
Yeah. What ties to that is that, I think a lot of people lose sight of the fact that the nefarious side of all this stuff is also a business. And it's important to remember that, right? So, there's an ROI analysis that's done just the same on that side for those, black hat businesses, effectively, that they're deciding that this is worth the cost to potentially yield that amount of money by doing X, Y, or Z. And so, that directly correlates to that, the effort and time cost and, hardware, et cetera, to do what you just talked about today is you can do it, but it costs a lot to do it. And 6 months from now, it won't. And that's really the thing. That's like when something is new and it's like, oh, wow, that can happen now. The first awareness of that, it's really rare, because you have to have the know-how, the capability, the tools, all of that to do it, and the wherewithal, really, right? But as soon as it becomes like, well, yeah, anybody could do that, then anybody will do that, and that's where it gets really, really risky, And so that's what scares me the most about that stuff is how, even in our own business, developing an ML model, we had math that was in our budgets. This is going back years ago now, before pre-LLM, of, the dollars it would cost to develop one, which I won't put the number on it because it's internal business, right? But it was a sizable number. If we're going to develop this model, X amount of time, X amount of dollars. That's our budget for this. That number, even before LLMs really hit, sliced in half in a year and a half. And then after LLMs hit, in particular because of the code generation capabilities, it cut in half again. So even developing, not even just, prompt engineering is its own cost model itself, which is much more about running it in practice as opposed to the cost of R&Ding it, because that's real fast. But even developing, traditional models with training, et cetera, the costs are, less than a quarter of what they were 3 years ago, effectively. And so, if you using that as a barometer, because I don't know what it costs to run a black hat organization trying to steal money. I've never done it, but I can logically presume that they're in the same boat, that it used to cost me X amount of dollars to steal Y amount of dollars from a company. And now it costs me 1/3 of X of that to get twice as much potentially. Who knows? And that's the scary proposition, because if the incentive is there to profit like that, anybody will pursue that, whether it's for a good purpose or a bad purpose. Mm-hmm. It's all about chasing the dollars at the end of the day on both sides of it.
It's insane. It's insane when you see big tech like X.
Yeah.
Did you know that somebody hacked the Ford company X account, and they put
I did hear about that.
Something insane.
Yeah.
They have to turn it down right away.
Yep.
They were bypassing the world's leading organizations in security.
Yeah. Yeah. And a lot of that still comes back to that, at the end of the day, your weakest link is that there's always a human involved somewhere. Social engineering is still by far the biggest risk in terms of, I can, 70 people trained effectively and remember, and then a 71st that's also trained effectively, but makes one simple mistake, with best intentions and even knowing everything. That's assuming they're well trained, and they can still make a simple mistake, and now the door's open, and that's all it takes. Now consider you have a resource that doesn't care or doesn't want to learn or whatever, it doesn't stick. You have to have people in an org still. That's still where the risk lies at the end of the day.
For sure. And Jeff, for our audience, we don't want to be pessimistic, like what you said, that it's just a job transformation.
Yes.
My people were scared. They were actually resilient. And I gave them the concept that I gave you, but also you need to understand that no matter how good AI gets, it could never have real emotions. And we have to understand that everything is done for humans by humans to humans.
Yep.
At the end of the day, we're trying to solve an issue that is going to benefit somebody else. That's what a business is. We're here to solve a problem in the most effective way that add the most value to your clients.
Agreed. Yep.
So you still have to interact with people. You're not going to do something to better a machine. No, you use a machine to better a person. So as long as you know that you need to have a human that has proper human feelings to understand another human and supply their needs.
Yes.
And on top of that, you know how to use technology, in this case AI, to do that, you will always have a job.
Yeah, I agree. I think QA and UAT are a good place to talk about it, because there's a lot of movement happening on quality assurance of just testing. Does this thing do what you intended it to do? Tons of room there that's being moved very quickly. And yes, that's changing jobs in the QA space, and justifiably. But when you're talking about, does this outcome now meet the need that we intended to do for our customers' need, that user acceptance testing component? Like that, I don't know that you'd ever want a computer program to say, we met that need, because at the end of the day, you're not selling to another computer, you're selling to a person. So you have to have an internal mechanism with people to say, I think that person's going to agree that this is what we wanted. So until we get to a point where a computer's selling to a computer, which I don't think will happen in the near term, you need people, because you're selling to people
that have feelings. And most decisions is by a feeling.
Right. Yeah.
Over and above their logic.
Right.
But you can create logic with AI, but you cannot create feelings. You can fake feelings.
Right.
I don't even think it's quantifiable with data. I mean, the human complexity of emotions is just supernatural, right?
Yeah.
Like, did you know that a lot of people that call customer services, they don't call to get the problem solved. They call to speak to another person.
Yeah. Agreed. Yes.
So I don't think that's ever going to go away, no matter how good the AI becomes.
Yeah. Well, what I will say there is so we play in this space a little bit of, you call it. Here's the counterpoint on that one. I completely agree with you, by the way, because I just the other day, I called my insurance company and I said, speak to representative 3 times to make it stop talking to me. But the reason why is because I could tell very quickly that I was not going to get the answer I need from that computer program. Right. So But there's the flip side of this of what if I was on hold for 45 minutes because there wasn't a person available? And if I did need something really simple answered of like, I need to make a payment because my automatic didn't go through, for example, I'd rather talk to a computer, and I would like that computer to talk to me like a human. So, we're engaged in that space too, with that. If you call into a dealership and you want to schedule service, for example, how do you do that? And it's one of those things where again, technology is changing rapidly here as we're moving from, something that's it's a workflow basically of we're going to ask you this, we're going to ask you this, we're going to ask you this, and oops, now we're going to jump out because you asked something we didn't expect. So go talk to a person, as opposed to 100% dynamic that at the end of every question that's asked or sentence that's said, it's okay, we've got enough information to say this is probably the next best thing to ask. And we're already seeing that, even just looking at the outcomes from actual customer interactions, that, the best one I've seen so far, I love this example. It's an example where in the phone call, the person is very frustrated that they know they're talking to a computer. And then they're saying, I don't want to talk to a computer. And halfway through the phone call, they start to accept it as, okay, I can talk to this thing. And you can hear the tone change of, I'm naturally talking to this thing. And by the end of it, they said, thank you, have a nice day, to the computer, like fully accepting that it was like just a regular human interaction. And that is success, because you got to consider that there is a level of frustration for that consumer that you've resolved with a computer program, because there's not a human there to do it is likely the thing, or you'd have to sit on hold for 40 minutes, which nobody wants to do. So if you can make it comfortable enough that you can just engage like you would with another person, it can be okay that it's a computer program, as long as the end user perceives it as such and understands the value coming out of it. That's the bigger thing, because it's an uncanny valley example, really, right? It's like, that what you're talking to it's not a person, but you accept that it's close enough that it's like, oh, I'll just talk to a like person. And that's where you hit the success mark, because the back and forth goes to very natural speaking. And that's going to be the most effective communication for the program too, because that's what it's trained for.
Incredible. So even that could be disrupted. Yeah, we're in unknown territory, aren't we?
Very much so. And it's very exciting. Yeah.
Jeff, over 40 minutes have gone by, and this has been a lovely conversation, but I know you're a busy executive. Thank you so much for your time. This was fascinating.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it was a great conversation. Yeah.
One last question. If you were in front of a billboard in front of the busiest highway on earth, what would you write on it?
Oh, wow. That is a left field question. What would I put on that billboard? I think it'd have to be something along the lines of, we all need to work together towards a common goal, and it's, I don't know how you say that in a way that's not idealistic, because realistically, I think it's more clear than ever how diverse the way people think can be, and that they're all in some capacity, at least a little bit, right. And they're definitely right to have their own convictions. That's for sure. So how do we find common ground and move forward? And I do firmly believe that all the technology changes that are occurring here plays heavily into this too, of how much disparity there can be. And, I'll avoid all the obvious topics of, social media and such playing into these things, but it's a factor. So I don't know where, the guardrails kind of come back on to say, there's more positive than negative for all these changes. And now society is benefiting as a whole. It's happening in pockets, and in other places, it's quite the opposite. And, there has to be some inflection point there where, really one way or the other, something wins, whether it's good or bad. And so I would truly hope that there's something there, that there's a consistent drive among people to want it to be generally positive.
Yeah, for sure. If we don't change, and that's why, my Christian channel for me is so important, because if we don't actually start listening to the Gospels and learning to love your enemy, because that's what it's all about. True love is about disciplining moral values and loving your enemies, meaning, no, you're not going to be okay what they do to you. You're going to pardon them so that you can actually let go and they can let go.
Yeah.
And work towards a common goal.
Yeah.
This is the time in place in human history where if you don't have moral values and you don't start loving your enemies, we're going to implode as a society, because we're almost there. We're almost there.
Yeah. And, to tie it back topically to what this podcast is about too, because it's totally relevant. It applies in business too, like across the board. If you're leading from the perspective of, that's our competitor, we're better. I don't need to talk to them, whatever. Or that co-opetition space or partners. I mean, across the board even with vendors, I tell my team all the time that I firmly believe that leading with being blunt and being direct about what you need and et cetera is better than trying to play games, because then invariably the people you're talking to will be blunt right back to you, and you can get right to, you can't pretend that the people that you're working with or that work for you aren't also trying to make money like you are. We're all working for a reason, right? And we're all on that same course. And if you acknowledge that and recognize that and inform your conversation with that, it leads to a much better outcome for sure across the board. It's very true that just don't presume that something's going to be negative or that you shouldn't engage or whatever. Go on positive and see what you can do. And sometimes you'd be amazed how people would turn around and say, yeah, we have an opportunity. Let's talk. That's exciting.
And you know what, Jeff, there is nothing more valuable for the psyche of the human being of having a job that produces value to others and gives you value.
Yeah.
This is the last thing I say. I'm sorry, but
no,
the founder of OpenAI put together a bunch of money. I think they spent about $60 million, and they did an experiment with universal basic income for people who had $29,000 a year income or lower.
Yes.
They gave them $1,000 a month for 3 years, and they had outliers. Like they did this whole study, and the conclusion was people eventually, they don't work for a living, they will get depressed. They will get into addiction. It's horrible. I guess he's freaked out that AI is going to replace every single job. But this proves to my point that even if we could, we won't.
Yeah.
Because the value of the human being, it's amazing when you actually go to a place where you work together towards a common goal. And that's why I'm saying this, because this is your billboard.
Right.
There's something inside you. What you have seen this many times in your career, when you have a big problem and you get together a bunch of developers and VAs and you actually solve the issue and you deliver it and your boss is happy. It's like, forget the paycheck. This is like,
it feels great.
Good, right?
Yes. Yeah, it does. Completely agree.
Yeah, thank you so much. God bless you. If people like to find out more about you or your business, if they would like to hire your business for what you guys do, how can they find you?
CallRevu.com, CallRevu.com.
Fantastic. Jeff, God bless again and have a beautiful rest of the week.
Thank you, you too. Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you for tuning in to the Leaders in Tech podcast. Check in next week to keep learning how to use technology and leadership to change the game. See you next time.